This is the story of the Morecambe Poverty Truth Commission and how a new group of commissioners emerged from the COVID-19 pandemic to tackle the most critical issues of their communities. We brought commissioners from each of our themed working groups back together to tell us how sharing their stories has changed the understanding of poverty locally and been vital in the creation of projects which will have life well beyond the commission.
We are the truth tellers.
The enlighteners.
The collective voice of change.
I think it is May. I think it's May the 5th. And I met Ali off the bus and we walked up and down the prom. I had no idea what I was getting into, really.
I was there from the first meeting that we had with all the community commissioners. So I remember being very nervous and not knowing quite what this whole process was.
Then we used to meet up in the park. We used to sat. Ali used to go to the little garage just over the way and come back with sandwiches. So we just sat in the park and ate it.
This was happening in a time, global pandemic, and I think that opened up a lot of stories because it was crisis upon crisis. So people were talking about the poverty in that really immediate sense, but at the same time it was so immediate that maybe that was one of the reasons why a lot of the commissioners that I met then aren't here now.
Ali, Lee, he always used to make us laugh because he used to come up and say, "I'm only here for the food." He was nice. And Steve.
With Steve, he always brought something up, but you could tell that it was so immediate to him that he couldn't always open up. So it was interesting with seeing Steve just gradually open up more and more about his own experiences.
I remember thinking, that sounds like something I'd be interested in when I'm a bit not as ill. And then when I came out of Walter Lyon and I started working with Let's Be Friends, it was actually Alex who suggested it to me again because I was really angry about some things, and he says, I think you should go and join Poverty Truth and sort of like have a release for that anger.
I think eventually I'd been through a really hard time. Somebody once said to me, "Julia, you're constantly ranting about these issues. You know, you're talking about them, you're well informed about them. Put that to some good, to good use."
I sent an email, you phoned, and I thought, oh, this is someone actually wants to listen, who's quite engaging in a different way, actually.
I've been involved since, like I said, summer of 2021 as a researcher, but I'm also someone that has a lot of lived experience of poverty. So actually I was a bit unsure how I should approach it at the very start, but I feel like just leading with the lived experience really opened up all these connections. So
I had no idea where we were going, really. I just turned up each time, and because I liked the people and people wanted to listen to me.
It was the opportunity to actually do something locally, that it wasn't just sitting and talking and complaining. It was an opportunity to make constructive changes.
While it's utterly crucial that community commissioners are genuinely leading, and therefore the civics that we get in, they've asked for. Often they don't know the individual names, and they don't necessarily have the connections, so it needs some of us to be working on that in advance.
So they obviously approached me, so I did some Googling to try and find out, and I was like, okay, this sounds really, really good.
So I had a Teams call with Roger, who, by the end of it, I was like, I want to do this. And then I spoke to Ali, and then I was invited to the launch. And I'm not sure whether I came in quite late, because it was just before the launch, I think. That was sort of my first introduction to anything.
We spent a lot of time getting to know each other in Cornerstone, the community commissioners, and then we sort of practiced what we'd written with each other as well, so we could give each other feedback on it before we actually presented at the launch.
It took weeks and weeks to write it. I didn't initially want to do a really long 11-minute worth of presentation, but I had to get what's in there, the points. But there was a lot of digging with it.
We want people to listen. We want to be heard and not to be judged. We want more action, equality passion, empathy.
I think that was such a fantastic start, because obviously a lot of it was the stories.
The stories were equally, if not more powerful than had been in round one. I was really impressed with the round two launch.
There was 100 people, wasn't there? And our young people spoke on behalf of other young people at the launch event, which was like really well attended. It was very emotional that day, listening to them and their stories.
For me, again, it was the young people's involvement, and that surprised me, I think, about hearing those voices of those young people, and that probably made me want to be involved even more, I think, because you don't often hear those young voices, and that's one of the things that I'm really passionate about.
When we first started filming, I was a bit like, oh, I don't know if I really like this. But then once we were asked like certain questions and we were getting our opinions and voices heard, I felt more confident with doing it and sharing my opinion on certain matters.
I remember your speech, and I just remember like you were so dignified and you were so cross. It just was really clear that it was really, really difficult.
What I remember about you, Marie, was the absolute passion but frustration in your presentation, which I found a bit mind-blowing, because there was also quite a bit of anger there in you as well at that presentation. And so when I think about that launch, you're the one that I remember because of that. Yeah, a lot of the other stuff was heartbreaking and heartrending, but yours was just like really in your face, which when it had an impact. And that's whether or not that's what you were setting out to do, but that's how it came across. Yeah,
I was absolutely setting out to qualify people. As an organisation, to be involved in something like that, which had an effect where you'd got leaders from council, you'd got NHS, you'd got police, you'd got everybody in the room, and for the first time, I think they captivated the audience, the young people and their stories, and I thought it was really powerful.
I think we felt listened to for once, because usually adults are like, oh, you're a kid, you don't know any better. But I think most of us felt listened to because everyone in the room was just silent and had their attention on us, which doesn't really happen very often. So
a snowflake can do no damage. A snowball can break a window. And the more people that we have that are together and of like mind in this, I'm sure that more people will want to latch on to this.
We grew up, we found to help. For me, I want to help. I want to assist anybody needs any help.
When people were introduced and you heard the stories, I made a point of coming across and speaking to some of the community commissioners. So I was looking forward to re-engaging and saying hi again. But it's so nerve-wracking, and I think it's taken quite a lot of time to try and break down that them and us barrier. And I think certainly in the first few meetings it was still quite divided a little bit.
Initially you feel a little bit intrusive. You don't feel part of it.
Yeah.
You might have felt more connected because you knew some people.
A little bit, because of Hannah.
You're not being
really.
excluded, but you can see there's rapport and established relationships.
Yeah.
So you there's a sort of bit of caution, I think, really.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was just when the civic commissioners met or at the end of the very first full commission, when we were asked how we felt, and Joanna stole my word because it was humble.
I remember being really quite nervous in my first commission meeting with other commissioners, because actually you were making yourself really vulnerable, and a lot of the civic commissioners, you sort of, this is what I do, I am this person because I have this job, and actually you have to kind of strip that away, don't you?
You don't want to jump straight in, and in some instances you can make changes, but having to sit on my hands or close my mouth and say, no, I'm not going to do that.
What I'm doing there, though, is not purposely, but it's the control bit. So you're used to being in control, you're used to leading and that. And actually what this is asking you to just park all of that up. It's a really different way of working, really different.
I think I remember a combination of feeling really angry. And I think actually that was one of the emotions that came out of me the most in the beginning, was the anger, which was linked to the frustration of, this is just too big and I don't know how we do anything about it.
It feels like trying to push water uphill sometimes, because there are really insurmountable boulders about the structures that are around us.
We can't change the world in however long we've got, 18 months or whatever. But can we find something significant to make a difference? Yeah.
I kind of thought like no one's going to listen to what we say, so I'll just have to just live with that. But the fact that everyone was listening made me feel really like, it made me have some sort of hope in that adults would actually start listening to us and hearing our opinions.
I was really pleased about lots of listening, people were able to listen rather than impose an idea of what this definitely works, this doesn't. You know, I was kind of used to that in the past.
This is about getting to know people well and about trying to listen deeply, and the fixing bit can come afterwards. But it is a different way of working.
It's very much a slow burner.
It's a slow burner.
Yeah,
Sometimes
definitely.
you think, where are we going? What's this for?
But it all becomes apparent. But it is all about strengthening friendships and feeling safe with the people that you're there with.
Because we'd been together as community commissioners for so long, it felt like, okay, now's the time to get going. We've brought in these professionals with, professional connections to poverty. Let's get on with it. So I think if you were a bit taken aback that we would have this other kind of stage now where there would be even more transformative listening. And so it was really good to hear from the experience of people from the first round, and a lot of them were just saying like, hang fire, sit with it. This is a really important stage too.
It made a difference to everybody when the civic commissioners were talking about themselves and everything, and how emotional people were telling their own stories, and quite often it's one thing that's been like a fork in the road, for somebody, living in poverty or, being a civic commissioner.
It triggers for me a later event, which for me was the most magical event we had in terms of storytelling, where civics opened up, which is when Sue Grubick stepped in a gap when someone else hadn't turned up to tell her story. And I couldn't even begin to tell her story right now because it would take too long, and I would be in streams of tears myself.
I think it made a lot of community commissioners realise that they don't just have a professional connection to poverty. There's a lot of lived experience of poverty that goes into. That's the reason why they do the work that they do.
Housing is here. Housing is here. That is income and expenditure.
And what's that one on?
This one is food injustice.
Which one?
Our education group, there was quite a lot of people in that, I remember. It was lively, there was a lot of passion in it, and I thought, right, so we've got lots of stuff we can bring to this, where's this going to go?
We are not causing equality of opportunity, because actually my kids here at Central and Heysham High School do not get to speak Latin or Spanish or German or go rowing or do any of the other posh things that could be done at the grammar school. It's not fair. And I'm really interested in that. I'm interested in why we're not crosser about it in our community, because it's so stark to me that those opportunities are denied to lots of families.
When people think of education, they tend to think of school children and teenagers, and they don't tend to think of that lifelong learning, or that second chance education. That was the flag that I wanted to wave, as well as the working with the young people.
I think because we're young people, we felt more valued, because usually adults don't really sit and listen to us for an extended period of time, but the fact that they did, I think we all just felt really included in the group. So
the income and food group, I felt that it was a really effective working group straight away. It was a good combination of civic commissioners and community commissioners, and I think we had a lot of things to go at, didn't we?
What about, is there something around local growing clubs?
There's quite a lot of those already.
So is there something about joining those up somehow? Does everybody know where they are?
I like the group. I think it's really good. And I think it's very important because income and food is so intrinsically linked. My issues aren't easy ones like just like some Wi-Fi in Morecambe where you can get on with that. mine are a bit stronger.
Total reform of the DWP and employment law.
Yes, that's the one.
Do.
Going back to that first week, I think it was really clear why a lot of us in that health group were there. I think the only tension that has ever been in the health group was how do we look at mental health and, say, physical health and put those together.
And I think Ali helped us with this, but Omar's experience is more around, and his wife's experience is physical health. So, and there's Gel as well. So, let's make sure, bring some of that into the space as well.
As a group, the health group gelled really well together, which I think is quite unique, and I think that's just because of those individuals in that room and how we interacted together. I think it's been a very different dynamic to the way the housing group's gone, for instance.
So private housing then, what would we want to look at with private housing?
Well, I'd want landlords to be brought to accountability.
Absolutely, Mum. Absolutely.
Of what they're charging and what they're not doing.
I think you probably knew it from the start, didn't you? I don't think you were under any delusions. No. But I think we sort of did have ideas of things we could do.
Yeah. Our housing group has come through the very end of COVID into a cost of living crisis and a housing crisis all at the same time. And it's been a real challenge to even think, with the enormity of everything that's going on, what can we legitimately do? So it might not be a massive housing development scheme that I think round one were quite influential in, but if we can change some small, all the small things will start to add up.
I always thought it was worthwhile, but I think it's been difficult because we haven't been able to do what we'd like to do, all of us. I think that's been difficult in our group, but that's specific to our housing group.
Having the time that we have had to spend has meant that we've thought about projects and spent time on them, and for one reason or another they've not happened. And that's been okay. We've had that kind of time to try things out and experiment and see what works and see what drive there is to take things forward, different things forward. And I think it's been more successful because of that.
So we're now asking each of the working groups to tell us what their projects actually are. Now, some of this is a bit like a check-in. When we introduce our project, it's like you start to give it some presence in the room. It starts to take shape, it starts to take form. So it's actually quite a living process, this. And it's really important we do the same as we do for one another. We listen, we get introduced to this new friend, which is one of your projects or two of your projects. And we go, oh, welcome. Oh, yeah, we like the sound of this.
Do you know what? It was perhaps the hardest bit for me. Because I think we were just at a point where things were sort of emerging, but we weren't clear.
I think it helps to give it some clarity, doesn't it? Because even when you're in these meetings, you're talking about it all through, and then when you have to stand up and go, oh, these are our three main things, and you suddenly hear yourself talking about it and going, oh, we are doing it. That's the clarity. That's the clarity we've been after the whole time.
I think bringing it all back together, I found that to be a really inspiring evening, just because actually there are all these little ideas and they're all coming together, and you think, actually, there's a lot of really brilliant projects here.
I can't remember whether it was 2 or 3 commissions back, but it was one of the ones where we were basically going to try and harvest information about what was realistically coming from the working groups. By the time we got to the end, even although some were not much more than a twinkle in the eye of the group, there were 15 projects already about to happen. And suddenly, I think everyone in the room thought, even though some were a little bit more cynical about some than others kind of thing, oh my goodness, we've had another round that is going to have outcomes big time.
To hear what the other people have been up to was slightly, again, humbling, using that word, that actually out of all those conversations that originally we were just doing a lot of talking, that these threads have come out of it, to me, is, yeah, it's kind of awe-inspiring, isn't it?
when we were saying about the training that we're doing and describing it, other groups were like, oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, we could do something like that. And it kind of like rippled out a little bit.
The reason that we wanted to do this was because we felt that so many of the stories that have been heard have had such impact on us as commissioners. So actually being able to share those stories with trainee GPs who are coming into that health workforce to enable them to have a wider and broader understanding of people, not just patients, would be a really good thing.
We all listened to the idea about training, and you could see the light bulb going off in everybody's head, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's huge. But you know, the project that we've launched at the food bank that we got funding for around like lived experience, that just wouldn't have happened without that working group. And you know, and that added to having Fiona on the board, that's going to change that organisation.
It was lovely to, when people kind of had a little bit of an audible gasp when we were saying about the space in the West End and what we were hoping to get out of that. And again, like I said before, the stuff that we can do with the Morecambe curriculum and getting those young people's voices in, that to me is all doable. And that especially is what I wanted to come out of this, I think. Yeah.
I feel like we're just starting to understand what our group can influence. From being really frustrated, I actually feel really hopeful now as we're coming towards the end of the programme. We've committed to continuing to meet. We've got probably the whole of next year more or less mapped out with things that actually I think we can make a difference with.
Now suddenly it's like all the different working groups, everything's just materialised, or it's just materialising like this month and next month, and that's really exciting.
I imagine that most commissions come to an end and people are thinking, but hang on, we've got 2 years more things we could do here, because as you get to know each other, as you get to trust each other, of course, there are loads more things that we could do together. So it's like, it's a beginning, and then you set off all these ideas, and these things have to have an end, but I can see how that's a bit bittersweet.
I think it is just really sad that it's going to end in some way.
Yeah.
Because I think as well, like, the relationships that we've built up, I think it's really important to try and carry those on in some way, shape or form.
I've met some really great people, that's why I've kept coming along, because the people have been so kind, really kind, and I needed some kindness at the time.
I had to say my goodbyes a couple of months earlier, and I felt a very deep sense of loss. At the time, I really did. Yeah. And I have to say, coming back and then hearing what's happening with the training, it's really, I feel quite emotional about it because it's so fantastic.
The legacy, I suppose, for me from this is the fact that I want to carry on all the stuff we've talked about. I don't want it just to be, right, that's it, round 3's cracking on now and I'm going to walk away and carry on doing the job I always do.
Maybe for community commissions, I don't know if you feel this way, but if we haven't moved mountains or changed the world in a really tangible way, I think it's possible sometimes to think, well, what did we do? But actually, for me as a professional person working in the charity sector, I know that this work has changed the way that I'm working.
One of the most powerful things that I've seen is remembering those first few meetings, some of the community commissioners, and seeing the confidence that has come out with what they were talking about then and the fact that they are now going and having these conversations at really high levels and making a massive difference.
I can see the confidence. And what was the news you've given me tonight?
So I've got a job for the
which
first
is
time.
I'm not
12 years.
It's not this, it's a whole host of things. But that
it's
to me,
made a difference.
I think so.
Yeah, I feel really proud to be part of it actually. It's really addressed the issues that I had in the presentation that I raised, and it could, it's going to develop into lots of new things.
And you've got your GCSE maths.
I'm really proud of that. I love maths.
So you should be.
I love it.
And maybe all the people that are on round 2, if they hadn't joined round 2, they'd be very different, wouldn't they? So I think, well, even if you had no results at all, look what you've done for the community commissioners.